So this video, I'm going to walk you through some ideas, specific ideas regarding the ontological influence of George MacDonald's work on C.S. Lewis. So this is a video series on how George MacDonald influenced C.S. Lewis philosophically. So there's a deep connection between these two thinkers. Although neither was a philosopher per se, they both have deep philosophical ideas, and I think that Lewis's ideas in philosophy were influenced quite a bit by George MacDonald. So this is not an extensive dive into all of the things these master writers wrote, extensive literature on both of them, but it's based on a short paper that I presented a few years ago at a conference in Lille, France, where I presented a paper that was published, subsequently published in a book called Persona and Paradox, Issues of Identity for C.S. Lewis, His Friends and Associates, published with Cambridge Scholars Press in 2012. So this overview is part of that longer work and part of the academic paper, and really wonderful conference. I think from what I was told by the host at the university there in Lille, was that this conference was the first of its kind on C.S. Lewis on the continent of Europe. So I don't know if there's been other conferences on C.S. Lewis in Europe, but maybe not very many. Lewis is, although quite popular in the United States, still I think remains less popular in the continent of Europe than in the UK. I've known met a few people in Spain who do work in Lewis, and at this conference was able to meet some people, some French people, and but I'm not a an expert on European scholars of C.S. Lewis, but there are some out there. So, all right, so let's look at the ontological influence that MacDonald had on Lewis, and one of the things I want to say is that there's a deep example that shows that Lewis was influenced by MacDonald ontologically. So MacDonald's, like Lewis, was an ontological dualist. They believed in two parts to reality. This reminds me of the old joke of you don't want someone to speak French for you because he'll say something like, well, you don't want to try and speak French if you don't know the language. This is a long wind up into a joke here, so just bear with me. Because there was once a person who was going to share about his life, and he said, no, I don't need a translator. I'll speak French because I know French. He was an Englishman. And he got up and he described his life by beginning by saying, Mon terrier est divisé du pape, which he thought meant my what is behind me, my past is divided into two parts, but what it meant was my behind, that is which is behind me, is divided into two parts. So when we talk about a dualist, we don't mean someone who duels. We mean someone that believes that reality has two parts to it. That is, there's a physical part and a non-physical part. And further, that the physical part is dependent upon the non-physical part for its being, for its origin in existence. So I take George MacDonald to be a Platonist, and Lewis is a Platonist as well. I think that's obvious throughout his works. The intensity of the level of Platonism on both of these thinkers, it probably comes from Plato himself. But I think within MacDonald's work, I think you can see that MacDonald was no ascetic. He didn't believe in the rejection of the body. Even though some people think Socrates, Plato's great student, was like that when he said, go offer a rooster to Asclepius for my healing. That was the last thing he said. Like, I'm healed, go sacrifice to the god of healing, because I'm now disembodied. But I don't think either Lewis or MacDonald, probably because they were Christians, were not ascetic in that extreme sense. And I'm not even sure Plato was. He just thought there was a higher order to the of the mental, of the rational to the physical. Anyway, you can debate that if you like, but look, Lewis was clearly a dualist, and MacDonald with him thought that the material life was good, but not as it could be, recognized by the pagans, nor as good as it would be, which was revealed by Christians. This is a Christian Platonist of sorts. So here's an example of MacDonald's ontology from his work called The Portent. It's one of his literary works. MacDonald writes, "What a wonderful thing waking is. The time of the ghostly moonshine passes by, and the great positive sunlight comes." A bit of that going on this afternoon. A man who dreams and knows that he is dreaming, thinks he knows what waking is, but knows it so little that he mistakes one after another, many a vague and dim change in his dream for a waking. When the true waking comes at last, he is filled and overflowed with the power of its reality. So likewise, one who, in the darkness, lies waiting for the light about to be struck, and trying to conceive with all the force of his imagination what the light will be like, is yet, when the reality flames up before him, seized as by a new and unexpected thing, different from and beyond all his imagining. He feels as if the darkness were cast to an infinite distance behind him. So shall it be with us when we wake from this dream of life into the truer life beyond, and find all our present notions of being thrown back as into a dim, vapory region of dreamland, where yet we thought we knew, and whence we looked forward into the present. This must be what Novalis means when he says, our life is not a dream, but it may become a dream, and perhaps ought to become one. That's again from MacDonald's work called The Portent. Wow, there's a lot to be said for that quotation. Life is not a dream. It may become one. Ought to become one. So here's an account of the distinction between what seems to be real and what is real. For MacDonald, this life is real, yet there appears to be a contradiction in this passage. On the one hand, MacDonald says that we will wake from this dream of life, implying that this life is a dream. On the other hand, MacDonald quotes Novalis, the poet, German poet, saying that this life is not a dream. So, is this life a dream or isn't it? Philosophers have said over the years that if you find a contradiction, you need to make a distinction. So, there are some difficulties, no matter how this question is answered. If we say this life is a dream, then we are idealists, rejecting the reality of the physical world. Think Hegel, maybe some postmodernists. There are idealisms and then there are idealisms. However, if we say that this life is not a dream, then we are materialists, rejecting the possibility of any world beyond this. Neither Plato nor MacDonald believed either of these ontological options. The way to avoid these difficulties is to affirm the reality of both the material and the spiritual worlds. This life is not a dream affirms physical reality, and this life is a dream affirms non-material realities. Thus, it is possible to say that the material world, that this life is not a dream, that outside it, it will seem like one. So compare this with Plato's words in the Republic. This is Plato now, quoting Plato. Always a good thing for a philosopher. Is the man who holds that there are fair things, but doesn't hold that there is beauty itself, and who, if someone leads him to the knowledge of it, isn't able to follow, is he, in your opinion, living a dream, or is he awake? Consider it. Doesn't dreaming, whether one is asleep or awake, consist in believing a likeness of something to be not a likeness, but rather like the thing itself to which it is like? I, at least, he said, would say, that a man who does that dreams. It's Plato's interlocutor. Back to Plato, or Socrates, rather. And what about the man who, contrary to this, believes that there is something fair itself and is able to catch sight of both it and of what participates in it, and doesn't believe that what participates is it itself, nor that it itself is what participates? Is he, in your opinion, living in a dream, or is he awake? He's quite awake. It's from the Republic, 475d through 477b. If we look at this life and think that this is on to my ideas on this. If we look at this life and think that this material world is all that there is, then we limit reality to a dream state. However, if we maintain that this world is like a dream by recognizing what is real beyond this world, then we will not be living in a dream. We will have awakened to true reality. One can see the two tendencies of the human mind towards materialism and idealism embodied in the two philosophers' attempts to cure the infirmity of the light princess. So this is from the short story. Well, it's kind of a novel, I guess. Short novel called The Light Princess by George MacDonald. If you have not read it, stop this video, go read it, go listen to it. It is delightful. So the Light Princess in the story was someone who was a princess who was kind of cursed, I guess, when she was born by an evil, I think an aunt, maybe. It's like the sister of the king or the queen. I can't remember all the details of the story, but and she floats off. She has no weight. She's materially embodied, but she just floats around. She can't be, she can't stay firm on the ground. Gravity doesn't apply to her. She's light in that sense, light of weight. So she has this infirmity, and the king tries all sorts of things to try get her healed. She would not stay put on Earth, this Light Princess. So when the Light Princess's mother and father seek help for their daughter, they turn to the College of Metaphysicians. The college is headed by actually two Chinese philosophers, Kapi Kek, who is a spiritualist and idealist, and Hum Drum, who's a materialist. I don't think these are actual Chinese names. Well, Kapi Kek believed that the princess's condition stemmed from the fact that she does not belong by rights to this world at all. She cares for nothing here. There is no relation between her and this world. It's Kapi Kek, the idealist. There's no relationship between her and this world. Often, cloud cuckoo land maybe, or just, out of this world. No pun intended. Well, Humdrum, the materialist, is having none of this. Humdrum maintained that, quote, the causes of the anomalies evident in the princess's condition are solely physical, end quote. MacDonald, of course, shows that the princess's condition is something else entirely. The Light Princess did belong to this world, but the cause of her ailment was not purely physical. It involved the problem of evil brought upon her from outside this world, which is solved by love and by death. This, of course, is the dominant in the Chronicles of Narnia. So shifting from MacDonald's Light Princesses now over to the Chronicles of Narnia, you might think of Uncle Andrew as a sort of materialist, hunting Narnia for material profit. And the Witches of Narnia, Jadis, the White Witch, the Green Lady, maybe all the same person. I'll let you Narnia experts debate about that. As a spiritualist, show us that reality cannot be either of these things in isolation from the other. What is real is not merely this world. We see this Platonic dualism throughout Lewis's works as well. The idea of dreaming and being awake to true reality are present especially in the Chronicles of Narnia. Gareth Matthews, a Lewis scholar, points this out, showing the direct influence of Plato on Lewis, as well as regarding true reality. Matthews recounts Lucy's fear in the last battle, quote, that this is quoting Matthews here, that she and others will be sent back to their former world. Aslan calms her fears. The dream is ended, he says. This is morning. Aslan assures Lucy and the others that it was their earthly life that was the dream. What now awaits them is true reality. That's from Matthews' work, page 179. I think it's interesting to note here that quite often neither MacDonald nor Lewis is present in a great deal of philosophical argument in their works, right? Especially their literary works. It's probably not the place for it. That is, there's no clear demonstrative deductive proof of the nature of reality or anything like that. It's rather a way of showing forth what is real by means of clear descriptions and analogy. This is what Plato did throughout the Republic. So this is not, beyond the pale of philosophy. And it's what MacDonald and Lewis did throughout their literary works as well. In fact, when it comes to arguing about the most important ontological questions, like does God exist, or was Jesus God, say, or did Jesus rise from the dead, MacDonald recognizes the place of argument for the sake of intellect, but maintains the leading to truth and knowledge of what is real, a true ontology, comes from a leading by means of showing forth light. Here's what he wrote in his novel, Paul Faber, Surgeon. Again, really good novel, long, not a short read, but worth the effort. Here's what he says there. MacDonald writes, quote, "The man who is anxious to hold every point will speedily bring a question to a mere dispute about trifles, leaving the real matter whose elements may appeal to the godlike in every man out in the cold. But even genuine argument for truth is not preaching the gospel. Neither is he whose unbelief is thus assailed likely to be brought thereby into any mood but one unfit for receiving it. Argument should be kept to the books. Preachers ought to have nothing to do with it, at all events in the pulpit. There let them hold forth light, and let him who will receive it, and him who will not forbear. God alone can convince, until the full time has come for the birth of the truth in the soul. The words even of the Lord himself are not thereby potent. So Lewis illustrates something similar to this as well, in a small way, regarding knowledge of God. We see in the Chronicles of Narnia that the children often struggle with unbelief. So this is an area of kind of moving on to maybe epistemology now. But there's kind of a notion of unbelief here. We'll get into epistemology a little bit more detail in a moment, but for now we're just kind of looking at believing in general about metaphysical realities. Okay. So back to this example from the Chronicles of Narnia. There's kind of a struggle with unbelief about what's real or what's really going on around them. Think of Lucy trying to convince her siblings that she has seen Aslan and Prince Caspian. She can argue with them, but they must look. She must follow her conscience. Her will and her obedience here are crucial. She must hold forth light to the others, and they must act in the light of her faith and their own. Lewis explains that, quote, in MacDonald, it is always the voice of conscience that speaks. He addresses the will, the demand for obedience, for, quote, something to be neither more nor less, nor other than done is incessant. So this is an interesting point about the will and our knowledge of metaphysical reality and our hearts being in the right place to be able to receive it. All right, so next video we'll talk about a little bit more about the epistemological influence, but hopefully you enjoyed this little foray into the metaphysical overlaps between and influence of George MacDonald onto C.S. Lewis. Thanks for watching.
Stay psyched, Grom. You.